Everybody, it's Leeroy from Leeroy Gaming, and it is Thursday, September 16th. So you know what that means. It is another Dev News Thursday on the Outriders block. In today's news, good news, bad news. Bad news is patch is still not ready. Good news, we're gonna talk in depth about the future of the Fortress mod, the issues with it, what the developers are planning for the future, and also some extra little hints. So with that all being said, let's go ahead, jump right in, and take a look at everything that is being shared today. So real quick note on the patch, as they're stating, latest patch is still working through some issues raised during the submission process. Team is continuing to work hard on patch and Outriders in general. So instead, they're going to talk about the Fortress mod. So we're going to have an extensive discussion right here that I'm going to cover what they're saying and also provide my feedback. So let's take a look. So topic for discussion, Fortress. As part of today's news and continue to previous week's discussion around weapon mods, the weapon mod meta. So last week we talked about the Moaning Winds deep dive. So make sure to check out my video from last week if you're curious about the Moaning Winds mod and what possibly they're thinking about doing about it. So they want to spend time taking a closer look at the Fortress mod and sharing our plans for it with you. And again, real quick, my 2 cents before I cover everything they say. Again, this is the only mod in the game that modifies anomaly power builds when it comes to weapon mods directly. So that's an issue in itself. We'll see how they address it. So as a reminder, Fortress mod is one of 3 core pillars of the current weapons mod meta. The shape of this current meta generally has led to a stagnation of build diversity, over-reliance on a very small amount of specific mods, as well as an under-reliance on the vast majority of other mods. I would 100% agree. As mentioned previously, this meta is particularly driven by a DPS timer-oriented endgame, where players feel like they are consciously or subconsciously forced to using Fortress or Moaning Winds, or both, if they want to play and farm in the most efficient manner. Number of players have found alternatives to these mods and have been able to clear gold timers and expeditions with such builds, but these players unfortunately remain as an exception to the rule. So it's true. You'll look on my channel, there are builds where you don't have to use Moaning Winds, we don't use Fortress, but again, with the average player, they're going to take the path of least resistance. They're not trying to be kind of necessarily like creative and come up with something cool or new. They just want to kill things as efficiently and easily as possible, which makes sense. That's exactly what I wanted to do when I was first starting out. So that's really big. I do want to point out here that they're really emphasizing the DPS timer-oriented end game. So again, I don't know if just me reading into it, but them emphasizing this as a problem of the meta. Maybe this is a potential hint. It's something different, like a horde mode coming in the future. Hint, hint, hope, hope. Let's see what happens. Now, however, if Fortress and Moaning Winds remain untouched in their current form, no amount of changes to endgame format, skills, or other mods and Outriders will dislodge them from the current essential mod slot blocking status. I'm worried about this comment. This screams nerf. Again, I behoove them. Hopefully somebody sees this video from over there and they get the message that, hey, you cannot just nerf these. This will be a disaster if that's what you do. As a reminder, the way Fortress currently works is that it usually provides a passive and consistent 43% damage increase to all damage that the player inflicts. In essence, take your normal damage and apply calculation 1.43 to it. That's it. That's the mod. No gameplay loop, killer damage event, or special situation required. Well, technically, this is slightly incorrect. You do have to build on around having at least around 100,000 armor. That's kind of like, unless they're saying this is broken and it works with any type of armor. But that is a conscious decision that you have to make to get that full amount. So just wanted to emphasize that. So they want to dissect this. The current queue with Fortress is that players can receive the maximum buff 43% for very small amounts of armor without having to invest in the armor stat through class nodes or movable progression layers such as armor mods. So again, are they saying this works at a much lower level than we thought? We thought it can take around 100k armor or so. Now, are they going to up this to, needing 200,000 or 300,000 to get the full amount, which would basically make the mod useless for most builds? We'll see. From a historical point of view, the intentions behind Fortress were that it should provide a damage buff for players committed to endurance builds of armor stacking and who would therefore likely need to give up on offensive nodes for other branches. And again, remember, this is doing all damage. This is going to buff your mod damage, anomaly power, weapon damage, everything. Problematically, Fortress is currently providing incredible value for very low investment. This became most pronounced when we rebalanced armor a few months ago so that all gear would provide more armor overall. An easy fix would be to correct that now broken armor to buff value calculation and require players to invest more into armor. However, this is an overly simplistic and imperfect solution, and it would very likely be seen as a heavy nerf, even though we would be returning the mod to its original intended tank or bruiser class niche use. And again, I'm glad they're picking up on this because there are no really tank bruiser. I mean, you can be tanky and bruisey, but you have to have the high DPS. Currently, because it's a speedrun meta, you have to have your cake and eat it too. You can't just be tanky and bruisey and slow and not kill stuff. That doesn't work. You absolutely have to have both, and this is one of the ways to do it. It would also not be a significantly enough change to properly disrupt the meta. We expect that a new meta would simply form around tank bruiser classes, of any non-tank bruisers being kicked out of the group, the way Devastators were before this potential was discovered. And again, I do want to emphasize the dark days when people literally as a Devastator could not find a random group because they got insta-kicked. Because Devastators do not have an ammo mod, like Blighted Rounds, for example, they really struggled. This was the tool that made their anomaly power builds viable. This is the tool that made their weapon builds at least potentially viable, depending on the situation. So this will be opening up a huge can of worms if they just nerf this. Now, we also do not want to simply make Fortress unviable for all but the niche class of builds, especially as we're aware that many players have committed huge amount of hours into grinding in order to obtain this mod. Very true. I know last night I had somebody specifically on my stream on twitch.tv/Leeroy Gaming stream, Monday through Thursday. Come check it out. Coming around just so they can get that mod. Well, also another piece, we got them the armor piece they needed. Didn't quite get that mod. Of course, the other person that ran with me, they got the Fortress for the third time in a row in 3 runs, which is statistically kind of crazy. But anyway, back to the news. Another problem is that Fortress provides an omni damage buff. Omni meaning it buffs all output across layers of the board. This means regardless of your build direction, fire or anomaly power, Fortress feels like a must-have. Now, I will say, I generally do not use this for my firepower mods. You can get better weapon damage output, potentially up to 75% out of a single mod, as opposed to this 43%. So yes, it's sometimes used in all kinds of builds, but I believe predominantly this is used in anomaly power builds. So I feel like this statement is being a little overstated. But yes, technically, it does buff all damage. And again, it's the only mod, to the best of my understanding, on a weapon that will buff the damage that your mods do. So for example, it synergizes with Moaning Winds tremendously. Generally speaking, it might not have been a big offender, as other mods could bring a comparable combat value, but the issue lies in that it provides a percentage-based damage rather than a flat number-based buff. This leads to extreme hyperscaling of damage. And this is also why the other mods are junk. So for example, like the mods that drop down lightning, it's like a flat 100,000 damage at max level right now. Well, why don't they go the other way? This is my opinion. Let me know if you agree in the comments below. Why not make those percentage based? Why might not like the lightning strike be a percentage of your firepower? And the higher your firepower is, the more these single target proc mods do damage. So all of a sudden, you're proccing single target damage that is, 500,000 per shot, 250,000, whatever it may be. But so it actually scales as opposed to these flat non-scaling mods that now are competing with this and causing this issue. Players will naturally always choose a reliable, ever-present mod buff that is active regardless of combat style or play patterns, especially when this mod increases total damage by nearly half, 43%. This is what Fortress currently is. Fortress is the best in slot mod, meaning that no weapon mod combo can really exist without Fortress as long as Fortress is in its current state. Not technically 100% true. Again, there are two mods that will increase 75% up to 75% damage for weapon damage mod. So it's in a S tier, but it is not the one and only option. But let's continue. Replacing Fortress with another mod in your build can even mean that the replacement mod performs weaker than its true potential, since it could always benefit from the 43% damage increase Fortress would provide. But again, the problem here is, that means you have to have that synergy. You gotta either use the gun that has Fortress on it, or obviously apply it, but then not apply one of the other mods that again can give you up to 75% damage. So there's a trade-off here. This is key. No matter how much we buff any other mod within the realms of reasonable balance, they will never be able to provide the same overall value that Fortress does, making those buffs inherently unable to displace Fortress. I would kind of strongly disagree. Again, make other mods scale off this. Again, we have straight up firepower mods that will buff more than 43%. So again, all you have to do is put out more mods or buff mods that you can't stack with Fortress, for example, or you have to sacrifice, for example, another mod that is also very high DPS in order to put it into that slot. Again, if you're trying to decide between 43% all damage or let's say 100% firepower, well, then guess what? I'm putting in 100% firepower every time into that mod. So there's some room for this. Now, we are most interested in giving players a choice on using the greatest possible amount of different mods in combination of one another, which in turn will lead to much more compelling gameplay loops. For example, we feel it will be healthier for players and a lot more fun to have 6 different mods on 3 weapons rather than 2 same mods on all 3 weapons. However, Fortress currently blocks 3 weapon mod slots. Again, they're kind of implying that this is the only way to play, and again, I disagree, except for potentially when we're talking about anomaly power mods. So I'm going to let that lie because, again, in that case, it is true. Finally, Fortress current form makes it fundamentally unfun, maybe a boring mod. I would disagree. I like doing a lot of damage, so I think it's plenty fun. You don't have to be juggling buffs and trying to juggle mechanics to be fun. Some people like this game to be nice and straightforward, do a ton of damage, kill things, boom. So again, this is a subjective comment. It requires no great thought, no gameplay loop, and no real skill before it provides its maximum bonus. That's so bad. Such uninteractive mods can be useful and necessary when creating specific builds, but if such a mod dominates the build meta across the entire spectrum as it currently does, it's fundamentally flawed. All right, you do have a point there. The above exposition on Fortress currently form is long, but essential reading for anyone who wonders why Fortress even needs to be changed. So here's the big thing right here. So what do we have planned for the future of Fortress? Before we begin, a small reminder. We do not plan to address the issue of either Fortress or Moaning Winds before we have resolved the challenges that drove creation of this meta and that continue to require its viability. You therefore do not need to worry about overly disruptive changes to the current power balance as long as the overall end-to-end gameplay experience exists in its current form. This right here, boys, this is, if there isn't, let me, PR talk right here. This is saying there's going to be a major expansion or DLC or change in how we play the game. Meaning, horde mode, baby. Big overhauls to loot as far as maybe new sets that make more interesting, viable playstyles capable, additions of new mods, where in combination you can sneak in changes like this without absolutely destroying everybody and all their builds, etc. Maybe level increases. I don't know. I feel like this is the most direct confirmation of them saying, hey, don't worry, don't freak out. We're not killing the game. You're going to be really happy with whatever new content is. And then while giving you a bunch of viable other options, we're going to mess with this a little bit. Again, my concern is would be still that dead time where people feel like the builds they have currently are nerfed until they get whatever the new replacement is. Bottom line is there's always going to be a meta, no matter what they do. So this is just a big problem because this meta is so prolific that pretty much almost everybody I know that plays this game utilizes these mods. And everybody I've asked would be pretty pissed if they became useless. So let's move on. So Fortress' current design and logic is being fully reworked and is being replaced with fresh logic. Woo! Its new effect will be as follows, pending further balances. Again, I didn't read this part beforehand. So shots increase your current armor and resistance by 3%, stacking up to 5 times. At maximum stacks, the buff is doubled and additionally grant 30% damage increase for 10 seconds. Oh. Ugh. Okay, let me absorb that for a second. So full stacks is 15% armor. That's junk. 15% resistance. Resistance is probably more useful on this. Oh, no. So I guess it says at max stacks, it's going to be 30% armor, and 30% resistance, and then 30% damage. Now, it is additional damage, so it's not just weapon damage. It works for everything, but it requires you to use shots, which will now pretty much make this way less viable for any anomaly power builds where this is mainly used. Developers, do not do this. Again, you're going to force people with anomaly. I guess you're just going to shoot randomly and to hit something. Now it says shots increase, so it doesn't say hitting anything. So anomaly builds are literally just going to shoot 5 times into the air as you're running around to keep the stacks maxed up. Or again, if something coincidentally is going to be in a way awesome. But again, as long as you don't have to hit anything, people are just going to make sure that you have a fast firing rifle or something like that so you can keep this maxed out. So it's going to be, because again, I'm assuming people will constantly just shoot their guns, keep this maxed. It's going to be a 13% damage loss, but it is going to be a 30% armor and 30% resistance increase. I like the resistance increase. That especially is quite helpful. So we'll see, as long as these can be just random shots, because then you can just make sure you keep this stacked up at all times. Again, anomaly power builds do not like using their guns. They're using their abilities, they're punching, etc. So anytime shooting is a downtime. Side note, players will need to perform 5 successful shots over 5 seconds to enter the full buff window. Stacks have a 1-second internal cooldown in order to streamline uptime across all weapon types. So that kind of sucks. Again, there are weapons that seem to fire slower than 1 second, like some shotguns. So this is basically kind of annoying because it makes, they're still going to do what I just mentioned, but you're going to basically have to be shooting your gun for 5 seconds. And then it sounds like, then the question is, do they drop off 1 stack at a time? Or if you just shoot your gun within the next 10 seconds, will it refresh all of the stacks? Hopefully. Otherwise, this is going to really, people are going to not be happy. This rework will address the issue described as follows. The mod will no longer rely on a broken armor stat calculation in order to provide its maximum buff. Players who already possess Fortress and want to continue to play with it should not feel a complete 9-day drop in power between the old and new Fortress. You'll feel a 13% drop, which is still a lot. While the damage buff will be an omni buff, the gameplay loop of needing to generate stacks through shots means players may become more circumspect with regards to which builds can make the most of the new Fortress. Again, all it's going to do is cause anomaly power people to just randomly shoot their guns. This is, we'll see. Let me know what your thoughts are on this, but I think this is, I don't like this. Again, for weapon power mods, this will be natural, won't be a big deal, unless you're like a sniper or something, in which case this won't work. Additionally, stacking armor and resistance buffs will reward players who have opted into additional armor and resistance from nodes or mods by making them even more tanky. This buff is multiplicative of the current value. This means if a player has 0% resistance, the mod will not provide baseline value on its own. Okay, so this stinks. This stinks. Because again, there's there's 2 nodes within each tree to receive and increase your resistance, and there are a couple of mods that do it. So you're either forced to get another mod that's going to apply this, or you get both of those skill nodes, which in a lot of builds are really out of the way. I think kind of like Technomancer is the only one that can kind of conveniently get them without too much of a hassle of a lot of builds. But this is bad. And then it's only 30%. I thought it was just going to be a flat 30%. No, it's 30%. So here's the bad news, boys. 30% of, let's say, let's say even 30% is what? Like 10%. So if this is multiplicative, unless I'm missing something here, this is not good. They need to change this to a flat value. No. I can understand the gunning. I can understand a nerf to 30%. Cannot understand this multiplicative reasoning. It needs to be additive and it needs to be baseline. The multi-layer nature of the fortress means that, if need be, it can be surgically balanced in a variety of ways. Okay. Finally, the mod's new logic will introduce a gameplay loop that will require players to employ some measure of observation, thinking, and skill when using it in combat. Put differently, during phase 1 of the mod, players will need to work to build the buff stack, which can be observed through the mod's new visual effects. Phase 2 begins when the defensive and offensive stacks are at their maximum. At this point, players will have a window of time during which they will be the most tanky and most powerful they can be. This is the moment when diving deep into combat will make the most sense, as you will survive longer and dish out more damage. Key moment to upload your skills and other mods and effects. As the buff wanes, players will find it prudent to pull back a bit and rebuild their stacks. So what does this mean? That this will drop off? Just like it works for 10 seconds and there's nothing you can do about it and it fully drops off? God, that feels horrible. This will lead to a natural ebb and flow in combat, which still enabling players to use Fortress to deal increased damage 30% during key moments of the battle. No. Played well, the new Fortress can reach a 93% uptime for defensive buffs and a 75% uptime for offensive buffs. Yeah, so this definitely means this is rough. That it sounds like, I don't know if each stack is going to individually drop off what it is, but this definitely means you cannot refresh this easily. That means when a player fights enemies for a full minute, 45 seconds of that time could be spent in increased damage window. And again, unfortunately, the battles are so chaotic all over the place. This is going to create inconsistent buffs to offense. I hate inconsistent buffs to defense because it makes your tankiness unreliable. So, no. You may have noticed that the new Fortress will provide a max 30% damage buff. Equally, some of you may feel that the new Fortress doesn't sound viable within your preferred playstyle. If you feel that this is a nerf when compared to previous Fortress constant 40%, fear not. Really? As part of an upcoming wider balance, we will be buffing many other mods, some legendary gear sets, and if possible, certain aspects of class skill trees. All these changes are intended to keep players as powerful as possible, while making Fortress an optional rather than an essential mod. Yeah, I have a feeling this is going to drop off in a lot of builds. But if they don't have a replacement, people can fly. You already lost a lot of viewers, and players. Again, luckily they're saying this is going to not come out until a period where they release new content. I'm reading between the lines. Thank goodness, but unfortunately, even you telling us about this nerf right now, I feel like we're going to lose even more players just out of anticipatory angst, I guess. This will reduce the reliance of must-have mods while also unlocking a much greater and more fun build variety as other mods and playstyles become much more viable. Now, I'm not going to be too negative Nancy on this. I like to be positive, and I'm going to reserve judgment until I see all the other mod buffs, all the other elements. But I can already say I hope they bring up a lot of other mods so that this can basically be effectively replaced, because this is going to be, for a lot of builds, a dead mod now, which I guess that's what they want. They want it to be a non-viable mod for a lot of builds, a lot of playstyles, so that other mods can take its place, I guess. We are hoping to create a snippet of gameplay using the new fortress so that you can see it in action before it is implemented. We'll share this in the future. Yeah, please share it, like hidden deep away in the middle of a lot of positive stuff like new content, etc., because this is going to get so many downvotes, it's not even going to be funny, is my prediction. For now, however, thank you so much for reading and participating in the discussion. Look forward to hearing what you think about the plan changes. Okay, and my input, get ready for lots of flame, lots of hate. People are not going to be happy about this. All right, so quick synopsis of my thoughts on this mod. I can deal with the nerf to 30% and the ramp up. I don't like the 1 second internal cooldown, having to do it for 5 seconds. If you have to do that, that's fine, but then it should be maintainable indefinitely if you keep shooting, in my opinion. Having a drop off sucks, feels horrible, especially since the drop off also gives you a drop off in your defensive stats, which you do want to be consistent. And again, armor, I could see the 30% armor buff max, I could see being multiplicative is fine, not the resistance. It's way too hard to get resistance, flat resistance. You can't get it on gear. There's a couple of mods, I believe one passive and like 1 or 2 active mods that will get you, up between 10 and 45% resistance. And then I think all classes have 2 nodes that will give you basically a total of 20% resistance. So you're saying you're multiplying 30% times 0, 10, 20%, maybe 30%. Best case scenario, 65% or something like that? I don't know. The point is, because it's multiplicative, it's not going to feel good. And remember, that 30% is only when everything's maxed out. Beforehand, when you don't have the buffs, it's going to be almost nothing. Definitely that last part, that's got to change before they release it. The other elements, again, you should be able to scale it up, that's fine, but then you should be able to maintain it 24/7 if you keep shooting, in my opinion. And again, I'm okay with the debuff from 43 to 30%. All right, sound off in the comments below. What are your thoughts? Make sure you participate in this forum post they have, discussion. Make your opinions heard, and hopefully they change this back. And let's again focus on the positive at the end here. This is even more just reinforcement that, hey, new changes are coming, new content is coming. Let's get hyped for that, hopefully. And let's put this in the back of our minds and forget about this horrible Fortress mod change. All right, guys, this is Leeroy from Leeroy Gaming. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell to be notified when new videos drop. And I'll see you guys in the next video.